POV, it's 2025, you're approximately 18 to 34 years old, and you're watching my first video on dual-type gym leaders, and then you comment this. That's right, I'm coming back to this topic and making rematch teams for all gym leaders that I mentioned in that first video. This will give us a chance to expand on some of their themes, give them all full teams of 6, and correct some of the mistakes I made in that previous video. In case you didn't see it, you should really go back and give it a watch, but the idea was that monotype gyms are sometimes a cakewalk since you can just spam your way through with a super effective move. Giving gym leaders a dual type theme allows them to combat some of their weaknesses in surprising ways, similar to how Elisa's Emolgas were a big obstacle to many players in Black and White. But before we get into making all these teams, let's go over some of my methods, as not doing that in the last one made for a lot of comments about the same few things. Number 1. In the first video, I originally wrote down levels for every Pokemon I included, but then cut them from the video as it wasn't that interesting. This did lead me to make a few controversial decisions, which I'll bring up as I go through each team. Since this video is about rematch teams, I won't be including levels, and I also won't really be looking at levels for movesets when I make them. Number 2. Hidden abilities are now allowed. I didn't want them on the regular gym leader teams, but for a rematch team, it feels like fair game. Number 3, I'll be giving almost every Pokemon a held item. I won't strictly hold myself to an item clause, meaning that no Pokemon can share the same item on a team, but I will likely try to not have duplicates of the teams. And finally, number 4, I won't be too restrictive about what Pokemon has the highest base stat total on the team. For the regular gyms, I tried to make the Ace the highest BSD Pokemon on their team, but for this video, I'm not going to restrict myself to that. If you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. Every little bit really helps me grow my channel, and right now, we're really close to meeting my goal of 5,000 subscribers. With all that out of the way, let's get into the video. The first gym type combo I used was Bug and Rock, a very fitting combo for the early game. The team was made up of Rockruff, Joltik, and Anorith, whose typings cover each other's weaknesses pretty well. Bug and Rock already cover each other's weaknesses pretty well, with Rock covering Bug's weaknesses to fire and flying, and Bug covering Rock's weaknesses to grass, fighting, and ground, leaving only water, rock, and steel as weaknesses. So let's kick this team off by first sending out Galvantula, evolved from the original team's Joltik. We'll give it the Unnerve ability, and it will hold a Focus Sash to guarantee that it can get out its first move, Sticky Web, an entry hazard that will lower our opponent's speed by 1 stage. From there, we'll give it Bug Buzz and Discharge for stab moves, as well as Giga Drain for some health recovery and a way to handle the team's weaknesses to rock and water. Next, we'll send out the Bug Steel-type Pokemon, Scissor. We'll give it the Technician ability to boost its lower power moves, and then the Silver Powder item to boost its Bug-type moves even further. We'll give it Bug Bite and Bullet Punch for Technician boosted stab and priority, Iron Head, as it will actually do more damage than any of Scissor's other steel type moves, even with Technician, and finally, we'll give it Sword Stance to raise its attack. Next, we'll send out Armaldo, evolved from the old team's Ace. We'll give it the ability Battle Armor and the Hardstone item to boost its rock type moves. Its moveset will consist of X-Scissor and Stone Edge for stab moves, Earthquake to handle its weaknesses to rock and steel, and Sandstorm to give its rock-type teammates a special defense boost. Don't worry, the absence of a smooth rock is intentional. We'll get to that later. For this next Pokemon, I really wanted something that would at least resist water. I looked at a few options, but landed on Cradily being the best, a fitting Pokemon to switch into from Armaldo. It's also got identical physical and special attack, so we'll have it use special moves as a lot of this team members are already physical attackers. Cradily is obviously not naturally resistant to water, but with the Storm Drain ability, we can make it immune to water. We'll try to have it wall out here for a bit, so we'll give it Leftovers as an item, Protect and Ingrain for some HP recovery, and then Giga Drain and Ancient Power as stab moves. Next, we'll send out one of the coolest Bug-type Pokemon, Volcarona. Hopefully by this point, Armaldo's Sandstorm should have dissipated, that being the reason we didn't give it a Smooth Rock. We'll give this Volcarona the Flame Body ability for some chances to burn, and then Heavy Duty Boots to avoid any entry hazards that might have been set up. We'll of course give Volcarona Quiver Dance to raise its special attack, special defense, and speed, Flamethrower and Bug Buzz for some stab moves, and lastly, we'll give it Psychic to ward off any fighting types that threaten our new ace, Tyranitar. Tyranitar makes for a great ace, as it's the only pseudo-legendary Pokemon that's either Bug or Rock type. It'll have the Sandstream ability and a Life Orb to do some extra damage. We'll give it the moves Dragon Dance to raise its attack and speed, Stone Edge and Crunch for stab moves, and Earthquake to handle more Rock and Steel Pokemon and at least hit fighting types neutrally, as the only real contingency Tyranitar gets for fighting types is Aerial Ace. Overall, this team isn't too shabby. We only have a few majorly shared weaknesses across the team, those being water, rock, and steel, which we already knew about. However, we do have Pokemon who can handle those types with either stab moves or really good coverage moves. I think this team does a good job of holding a similar vibe to the original, but way leveled up. With that, let's go on to gym number 2. Our next gym had the type combination of electric and flying. This combo is a really good one, as electric is only weak to ground, which flying is immune to. From there, flying only has 3 weaknesses, one of them being electric, which of course the new type combo is now only going to take neutral damage from, so this leaves us only needing to protect against rock and ice types, which are particularly fragile types. This team has a bit of a tailwind strategy going on, so I'll try to keep that hanging around. First off, we'll send out Pawmot, the evolution of the original gym's Pawmo. As an electric fighting type, it can hit our weaknesses of rock and ice for 2 times damage. We'll give it the ability Iron Fist to power up some of its moves, and a Life Orb to do extra damage. We'll give it the moveset of Close Combat, Thunder Punch, and Mach Punch for stab moves, as well as Ice Punch to ward off any ground types that threaten it. Next, we'll evolve the original team's Corvisquire into Corviknight, now giving it the Steel type. This will seriously help us out, as Steel is also good against both rock and ice. We'll give it the ability Mirror Armor, which will treat any stat drops used against us to a crisp Uno reverse card, and we'll give it the Metal Coat item that will boost the power of its Steel-type moves. We'll give it the moves Iron Head and Brave Bird for some powerful stab, and then Roost to recover HP from its recoil damage. Finally, we'll have it set up Tailwind for the team, which will help itself out since it doesn't really have a very high speed stat. Next, we'll send out another Pokemon that can further play into this team's trope of not having a lot of weaknesses, Rotom Wash. It's only weak to grass due to its levitate ability, and we'll give it leftovers so it can stay on the field for a while. Its moveset will consist of Hydro Pump, Thunderbolt, Will-O-Wisp, and Pain Split. This will give it some really strong stab moves, but also the ability to give out burns for chip damage and get some HP recovered by a Pain Split. For our next Pokemon, I would just feel really remiss if I didn't use Luxray, the classic monotype electric Pokemon. Luxray has a really high attack stat, but we'll boost it even further with the Guts ability and a Flame Orb to self-inflict a burn. Wild Charge will be the move to use, but since it deals recoil damage to Luxray, we'll also give it Thunder Fang as another physical electric move. We'll then give it Ice Fang to handle ground types, and Facade to deal double damage since we're burned. For our 5th Pokemon, we'll send out the old ace, Kilowattrel. We'll give it the Magnet item to boost our electric type attacks, and a combo of its signature Wind Power ability and Tailwind. I didn't give Kilowattrel its Wind Power ability on the last team, because a Tailwind boosted Electro Ball from this Pokemon was already strong enough for a second gym, but for a rematch, we'll take everything we can get. The combination of this ability and move will set us up perfectly to use Electro Ball. Finally, we'll give it Air Slash for some flying stab and agility to get even more powerful hits with Electro Ball. Lastly, we'll send out the Dragon Flying type Pokemon, Dragonite. No shade against Salamence, but I just think Dragonite fits this team a bit more. It'll benefit greatly from the Tailwind set up by Kilowattrel, and we'll give it Heavy Duty Boots to avoid any entry hazards and let it make use of its multi-scale ability. For moves, we'll give it more of a spread, with Dragon Dance to boost attack, Fire Punch to ward off its 4 times weakness to ice, Iron Head to handle rock and fairy type Pokemon, and finally, Outrage to do a ton of damage. This team seems to rock defensively, having very little shared weaknesses. I also like how we were able to keep all 3 original team members, but then still give it a big glow up. Now let's go on to the 3rd gym. For this gym, we used a really interesting typing, Normal Ghost. It's unique because it's the only type combination that is immune to both of its parts, and it has another immunity to fighting. That only leaves Dark as a weakness. The first Pokemon I want to talk about is Hisuian Zoroark, the only normal Ghost type Pokemon. I'm mentioning Zoroark first, not necessarily because it will be the first Pokemon we send out, but because in order to make full use of its illusion ability, we'll have this gym leader randomize the order it throws out each Pokemon. As I move forward and talk about Pokemon, keep this in mind. We'll give Zoroark the Choice Specs item, letting it make use of its high special attack stat. We'll give it U-turn in order to escape and hit dark types for super effective damage, but then we'll give it the moves Shadow Ball, Hyper Voice, and Flamethrower for some stab and coverage moves. Next, we'll talk about Annihilape. It felt really fitting to put a fighting ghost type Pokemon on this team, as it's also just kind of a rare typing that has some weird interactions due to ghost immunities. We'll play into Annihilape's bulk here, giving it a Chesto Berry and Rest combo, along with the moves Bulk Up, Rage Fist, and Drain Punch for longevity. Next up, I really just wanted to go all out and use a Pokemon that doesn't get a lot of spotlight anymore, Slacken. This Pokemon is a beast with a whopping 670 BST, but of course it has the ability Truant, keeping it from moving every other turn. We'll give it the Leftovers item to at least get back some HP on those turns, and since we can't move every other turn, we'll give Slacking the move Giga Impact for some stab, since it requires a recharge. We'll then give it Hammer Arm to hit Dark types, Throat Chop to hit Ghost types, and Yawn to put our opponents to sleep. The next Pokemon we'll talk about is the Ghost Fairy type Mimikyu, with the signature ability Disguise, allowing it to take one hit for free at the beginning of the battle. We'll give it the Weakness Policy item, which will boost its attack once it gets hit by a super effective move. We'll give it Swords Dance to increase its attack, and then Shadow Claw and Play Rough for some stab. Play Rough will help us further against Dark types. Lastly, we'll give it Confuse Ray, since a Ghost type team just wouldn't really be complete without some sort of confusion strats. So far, the team is looking pretty physically heavy, with not a lot of special attackers. For that reason, we'll send out Porygon Z next. Its ability will be Adaptability, to give its normal type attacks an extra boost, and we'll pair this with the Silk Scarf that boosts the normal type moves even further. For a moveset, we'll go with Nasty Plot to raise special attack, Tri Attack for a stab move that can hand out some status conditions, Shadow Ball to hit ghosts, and Recover to get back some HP. This team's ace will be the Fire Ghost type Pokemon Skeledirge. It'll have the Unaware ability, allowing it to ignore any stat changes our opponents have set up. We'll give it the Heavy Duty Boots to avoid any hazard damage, since it might be weak to them as a fire type. For moves, we'll of course give it its signature move Torch Song, which buffs its special attack every time it uses it. We'll then give it Will-O-Wisp to burn its opponent, and Hex to do double damage if we were able to pull that burn off. Finally, we'll give it Alluring Voice to hit some dark types for super effective damage. I really like this team overall. I think we've kind of left the stalling theme that we had before, but we're still dealing out lots of status conditions and using moves like Paint Split, which Ghost Gyms are usually known for. Anyways, let's get into the next one. For Gym 4, I went with the Fire Grass combo, which obviously turned into a Sun team. Fire was the hardest type to combine with another, as a lot of its combinations resulted in 4x weaknesses, but Fire and Grass complement each other very well. Starting this team off, we'll actually send out Ferrothorn first to do some setup. We don't want it to take any sun-boosted hits from fire types after all. We'll give it the ability Iron Barbs and a Rocky Helmet to double that effect. It'll start its moveset off with Stealth Rock and Leech Seed to set up hazard damage and get some HP back. And then we'll give it Power Whip for a very powerful stab move, and finally, we'll give it Bulldoze to at least be able to handle fire types a little bit. Next, we'll want to send out a Pokemon with the ability Drought, but we'll upgrade this team's original Torkoal to Ninetales now that hidden abilities are fair game. We'll give it a Heat Rock to keep the sun up for 8 turns instead of 5. Ninetales is usually used as a wall, but since we want the sun to still be up for some of our other Pokemon, we'll give it more of an offensive kit. For this moveset, we'll give it Nasty Plot to double its special attack, Weather Ball, which will become a fire-type move, and double to 100 base power in the sun, Scorching Sands to handle rock and poison types and potentially leave them with a burn, and then Solar Beam to handle water types. Next, we'll send out our old ace, Scovillain, with the Chlorophyll ability to double its speed. No shade to this Pokemon, but now that we can upgrade to some better ones, its stats just don't really hold up to be in the back of the pack. With the sun still up, we don't need to give it Sunny Day or a Heat Rock, so instead we'll go the Choice Specs route. We'll give it Flamethrower, Solar Beam, and Giga Drain for stab, as well as Zen Headbutt, which doesn't benefit from the specs, but is really our only contingency against poison types. Next, we'll send out the starter Grass-type Pokemon, Rillaboom. It will have the ability Grassy Surge, which will set up Grassy Terrain as soon as it comes out, powering up Grass-type moves and giving some health back to any grounded Pokemon for the duration of the effect. For a held item, we'll give it an Occa Berry, as this will lower the damage dealt to us by a fire-type move. For its moveset, we'll of course give it Grassy Glide, a move that will become priority during Grassy Terrain, Solar Blade, a physical version of Solar Beam, Earthquake to ward off fire types, and Brick Break to ward off ice types. After that, we'll send in a Pokemon to handle our weakness to flying, Hisuian Electrode. The sun should be down by now, so if Electrode is hit by a fire type move, it at least won't be sun boosted anymore. We'll give it the ability Static to potentially paralyze its opponents, and the item of a Focus Sash so that way it can get out Agility before it then uses Electro Ball. We'll also give it Energy Ball for some Grass Stab, and lastly, we'll give it Charge Beam to raise its special attack. Finally, I'm going to make what might be a controversial decision and say that this gym leader's ace will be Charizard, the fire and flying type Pokemon that everybody loves to hate. We'll give it the Solar Power ability, which will raise its special attack, but at the cost of losing some HP every turn. For its item, we'll of course have to give it Heavy Duty Boots to avoid a 4x hit from potential Stealth Rock. We'll give it Flamethrower and Air Slash for some stab moves, Scorching Sands to hit rock, poison, and electric types, and lastly, we'll give it Solar Beam to handle water types again. Overall, I think we did pretty good for the hand we were dealt with this team. Grass is definitely one of the best types to pair up with fire, but it does still leave it with a few weaknesses. The trouble of having a sun team with these two types is that any of our grass type Pokemon are susceptible to getting hit by sun boosted fire type moves. But I do really like that we got to use Grassy Terrain this time around. With that, let's head on to Gym 5. Next up, we have the type combo of Fighting and Psychic, a cool one that represents the duality of Brains and Brawn. They also do have some mechanic synergy, with Fighting resisting Psychic's weaknesses of Bug and Dark, and then Psychic, of course, resisting itself. The original team used Trick Room to set up about half of its team to be slower Pokemon, and the other half to be faster Pokemon, which also played into the duality theme. We'll try to keep that around if we can. We'll start things off, just as we did last time, with Galarian Slowking to add some fairy coverage as it's a poison type. It'll have the ability Own Tempo to prevent confusion, and we'll give it Black Sludge for some healing. We'll of course first have it set up Trick Room, reversing the speed order of the battle for 5 turns, and then we'll have it use Eerie Spell for a Psychic Stab move, and finally a Toxic and Venoshock combo. Next, we'll send out Malamar, a Psychic Dark-type Pokemon with the ability Contrary, which will reverse any stat changes that happen to it. To take advantage of Trick Room, we'll give this Pokemon an Iron Ball to halve its speed, and then we'll give it Fling to deal a devastating 130 base power attack that can also bring our speed back up when Trick Room ends. Next, we'll give it Psycho Cut and Throat Chop for some high power stab moves and close combat to make use of its Contrary ability. Next up, we'll send out the classic Pokemon Lucario, a Fighting and Steel type. This typing gives us a lot of much needed resistances, and I think the Aura theme just fits well for this type combo. We'll give it the Justified ability to potentially get an attack boost on a clever swap in to a Dark type attack, and we'll give it a Life Orb to do some extra damage. We'll give it the moves Nasty Plot for setup, Orosphere and Flash Cannon for stab, and Shadow Ball to hit Psychic and Ghost types. Next, we'll send out Hawlucha, the Flying and Fighting type Pokemon. On the original video, I got a lot of comments suggesting to give it the Unburden ability, which will raise its speed when it uses an item. In order to make quick use of this, we'll give it a White Herb and Close Combat, so it can use Close Combat once to lower its defenses, and then the White Herb will heal those status ailments and give it a speed boost from Unburden. From there, we can give it Acrobatics, which will double in power since we no longer have an item, and then we'll give it Rock Slide for coverage against flying types, and Poison Jab for fairies. Then we'll send out the gym's old ace, Gallade. We'll keep this one really similar to its original setup, giving it the Sharpness ability and a Weakness policy to boost its attack when it's hit by a super effective move. Its moveset will consist of Sacred Sword, Poison Jab, Night Slash, and Psycho Cut. If you watched the last video, you'll know I didn't give Gallade Psycho Cut, but that was just because it's now only learnable at level 42 and it's no longer a TM. But for rematch teams, there's no reason not to use it. Lastly, you might have predicted that we're going to be sending out a Metagross, a Steel Psychic type Pokemon. Its Clear Body ability will keep it safe from any stat drops, and we'll give it the Twisted Spoon item to raise its Psychic type moves. For a moveset, we'll give it Meteor Mash for some stab that could also raise its attack, Psychic Fangs for more stab and barrier mitigation, Earthquake for a strong coverage move that can also hit a lot of types for neutral damage, and Body Press to handle dark types and make use of a really high defense stat. Once this team is put all together, I really like it. I think it has some really strong themes of duality, especially with Lucario and Metagross serving as a special fighting type and a physical psychic type, which are definitely subversions of your expectations. I'm also glad I was able to make use of Trick Room again and make peace with many of my viewers by finally giving Gallade the moves it deserves. Our 6th gym had a type combo of Fairy and Steel, one that I like both technically and aesthetically. Both types already only have a few weaknesses, but Steel covers Fairy's weakness to Poison, and Fairy covers Steel's weakness to Fighting. The old team had a bit of an aversion to Fire, so let's try to fix that. Also, I originally made this a Sandstorm team because I incorrectly thought that Steel types got a special defense boost from Sandstorm, but that only applies to Rock types, even though Steel and Ground types are not hurt by Sandstorm. First off, we'll send out Galarian Weezing, a Poison and Fairy type. I know some of his other abilities are cool, but we'll need to give it Levitate since this team really needs to pay attention to ground. We'll need it to do some setup, so we'll give it Black Sludge for some HP recovery, and Toxic Spikes to send out some hazards. We'll also give it its signature move, Strange Stream, a Fairy type move that can confuse its target, Sludge Bomb for some poison stab, and finally Psybeam to hit any poison types that threaten the rest of the team. Next, we'll send out a Pokemon to handle some of our team's weaknesses to fire, Aggron, the Steel and Rock-type Pokemon. Aggron is a bit of an upgrade from the original team's Steelix, since its Steel Rock typing has it take neutral damage from fire, unlike Steel Ground. We'll give it the ability Rock Head to protect it from any recoil damage, but then we'll also give it a Focus Sash to mimic its other ability, Sturdy. For a moveset, we'll of course give it Head Smash to take advantage of Rock Head, and then Iron Head to deal some consistent Steel Stab. We'll then give it Aqua Tail for coverage against ground types, and Earthquake against steel types. Next up, we'll send out the Psychic and Fairy type Pokemon, Gardevoir, with the Trace ability. Its typing doesn't really offer us anything against our big weaknesses on the team of ground and fire, but it does help out defensively when you consider all of our team's weaknesses. We'll take advantage of the fact that ground and fire are not strong against it by giving it a Choice Scarf and Trick combo, which could lock our opponent into a move of another type that won't hit the rest of the team for too much damage. We'll then also give it Moonblast and Psychic for some stab moves, and then Shadow Ball to hit ghost types. Next, we'll send out Primarina with the ability Torrent. I know it has Liquid Voice as a hidden ability, but there's just really not that much reason to use it, as all the moves that will benefit from it are either outclassed by Sparkling Aria or Fairy type, which we already want to use. We'll give it the Mystic Water item to strengthen its water type moves, which will be good against our team's ground and fire type weaknesses. Its moveset will consist of Sparkling Aria and Moonblast for some stab power, Psychic Noise to handle poison types, and Flip Turn to make a quick switch out. After that, we'll send in the original ace, Tinkaton. We'll give it the Own Tempo ability and an air balloon to protect it from ground moves, at least for a bit. In the original video, I really wanted to give Tinkaton an air balloon, but just totally forgot to put it in the video. We'll switch this from being our ace to more of a support role, still giving it Gigaton Hammer and Play Rough, but then we'll give it Thunder Wave and Encore to trick up our opponent. Finally, we'll send out our new ace, Aegislash. This Pokemon makes a lot of sense for a Fairy Steel team, as it's themed around a myth like King Arthur. It'll of course have the Stance Change ability, and we'll give it Leftovers for some HP longevity. To balance this team out, we'll make Aegislash a physical attacker, giving it King's Shield for some defensive plays, Iron Head and Shadow Claw for stab, and then finally we'll give it Sacred Sword to protect it from dark types. I really like this team overall, and I think we've made some dramatic improvements in terms of what types it needs to watch out for. Aegislash also makes for a really great team member and a really powerful ace. But now, let's head on to gym number 7. Gym number 7 used the really cool typing of Ground and Ice. It's a combo that's really good offensively, especially when you consider the move Freeze Dry, and it still covers each other's bases when it comes to defense. Ice only resists itself, but that's great as it's one of Ground's only weaknesses. Ground can then deal 2 times damage to Steel, Fire, and Rock, which all threaten Ice. Firstly, we'll send out a Lapras with the ability Shell Armor to protect it from critical hits. We'll give it an Icy Rock and Snowscape to set up snow for the team, which will boost the defense of our Ice types. We'll give it Freeze Dry as a great Ice type move that can also hit Water types for super effective damage, and Hydro Pump for some great Water stab. Then, I think we just really have to give it Sheer Cold, as a one-hit KO move just feels like a good fit for a rematch team. Next up, we'll send out Gastrodon as a bit of a wall. This is a great pick for this team, as it isn't weak to fire, and can give us a water immunity with the Storm Drain ability. We'll give it Leftovers for longevity, and have it set up Spikes. We'll flesh off this moveset with Earth Power for stab, Recover for some more health regain, and Blizzard to handle grass types and take advantage of the snow. Next, we'll send out Excadrill. In the first video, I claimed that only 2 Pokemon resisted the Ice Ground combo, but that isn't technically true, since some Pokemon who would be hurt at least neutrally by this type combo have abilities like Levitate that protect them from it. To fix that, we'll give Excadrill the Mold Breaker ability, which will allow it to hit through those type defensive abilities. We'll give it an Air Balloon to protect it from ground moves until contact is made, and then Sword Stance for setup. It'll have Earthquake and Iron Head for stab moves, and then we'll finish off its moveset with Aerial Ace to handle fighting types. After that, we'll send out Alolan Ninetales with its hidden ability Snow Warning. We won't give it an Icy Rock, but we'll instead give it the Nevermelt Ice to boost its Ice-type moves. We'll start off its moveset with Aurora Veil to decrease damage taken, Blizzard and Moonblast to deal stab damage, and then Roar to get rid of any steel types that threaten it, since we don't really have any coverage options for that. Our old ace, Mamoswine, will be next, buffed up with some new defenses due to its Thick Fat hidden ability. We'll still give it a Chesto Berry and Rest combo, along with its original moveset of Avalanche, Freeze Dry, and Earthquake. Finally, we'll finish off the team with the ground Dragon-type Pokemon, Garchomp. We'll give it the Rough Skin ability to damage anyone that makes contact with it, and a Life Orb to do extra damage. For a moveset, we'll give it Swords Dance for setup, Dragon Rush and Earthquake for powerful stab moves, and then Iron Head to handle its weaknesses to Ice and Fairy. This team is probably the most similar to its original so far, but I think we've still made some big improvements. The entire last team was weak to fire, so it's nice to have Pokemon like Gastrodon, Thick Fat Mamoswine, and Garchomp to resist that. Now, let's head into our final gym, number 8. The final dual-type gym for this video has the type combo of Water and Dragon, some of the best types throughout the series. Defensively, this combo is great, as it's only weak to Dragon and Fairy past Gen 6. Dragon-type Pokemon also just tend to be stronger than most, and Water being the most abundant type means we have a lot of great options to choose from. First, we'll send out the unassuming Palafin with the ability Zero to Hero and Mystic Water. It'll of course just use Flip Turn right at the beginning of the battle, but it will come back out later. From there, we'll send in our Chaludon, which a lot of people wanted to see on the team last time, but I just didn't use because it was too high of a base stat total. We'll give it the Stamina ability to up its defense whenever it takes damage, and a Damp Rock to pair with Rain Dance for some extended water boosting moves. Electro Shot is a must-have for this Pokemon, as it will only take one turn to use in the rain. We'll also give it Flash Cannon for Steel Stab, and Draco Meteor since we can bring our special attack back up by using Electro Shot. Next up, we'll send out Dragalge, a Poison Dragon-type Pokemon that can help us with our weakness to fairies. We'll give it the Poison Point ability for a chance to poison, and Black Sludge to regain some HP. Its moveset will consist of Sludge Wave and Dragon Pulse as stab moves, as well as the Rain-boosted Scald to deal burns and Shadow Ball to handle psychic types. We'll then bring out our old ace Dracovish with the Strong Draw ability, but this time with a Choice Scarf to boost its speed and deal double damage with its signature move Vicious Rend if it moves first. We'll also give it Outrage for Dragon Stab, Iron Head to handle fairies, and Ice Fang for some extra coverage. Once Dracovish is down, we'll send back out Palafin, but now this time in its hero form. It'll keep Flip Turn in case it needs to switch out, but the rest of its moveset will be Aqua Tail for Stab, Iron Head to handle fairies, and Ice Punch to handle dragons. Next up, we'll send out Walrein, the Water-Ice type Pokemon. We'll give it Thick Fat for extra resistances, and a Damp Rock and Rain Dance to set up Rain for our ace. For attacking moves, we'll have it use Rain-boosted Surf, Ice Beam to handle dragons, and Earthquake to handle electric types. And yeah, I know, originally I didn't use Kingdra because I thought it would be a bit too basic, but I got a serious amount of comments that were disappointed that I didn't use it, so I thought it would be a perfect addition for a rematch team. We'll give it the Swift Swim ability for double speed in the rain, and a Dragon Fang for boosted stab moves. Its moveset will consist of Dragon Dance to set up, Rain-boosted Hydro Pump, Dragon Pulse for stab, and Body Slam for a chance to paralyze. I liked making this team a lot because there were just a lot of obvious improvements that could be made to it, like evolving Duraludon into Archaludon. Palafin is also a Pokemon that's just way too strong for a regular gym battle, so I'm glad it could shine during this rematch. Now, I wasn't lying when I said that last one was the last gym team, because next we'll be making another team for a Poison Dark Evil Team leader. I'm not exactly sure how a rematch would work for that, since it's not a gym, but I suppose this could just represent another post-game fight that you would be able to seek out. Poison and Dark being left over from the 8 gyms makes a lot of sense, as Dark is a type that's almost never associated with a gym. Defensively, it's pretty good, with the 2 types canceling out all of each other's weaknesses except Ground. Both types also just kind of have themes of using a lot of nefarious strategies. First of all, we'll send out Glamora again, with the ability Toxic Debris, which will set up Toxic Spites when we're hit by a contact move, and we'll give it the Rocky Helmet item to make matters worse on those contact moves. We'll again give it both Spikes and Stealth Rock to set up some other hazards, along with Power Gem and Sludge Wave for stab moves. Spiritomb will stay as the second Pokemon on this team to continue to block Rapid Spins, but this time we'll give it its hidden ability, Infiltrator. Along with the Leftovers item, its moveset will consist of Nasty Plot to set up, Shadow Ball and Dark Pulse for stab moves, and then Confuse Ray for some added annoyance. Sticking again with the original team, we'll send out Roserade, the Grass Poison type Pokemon, with the ability Poison Point for a chance to poison when we're hit by contact moves. We'll give it a Poison Barb to boost its poison moves, and a moveset that will consist of Venom Drench to lower the stats of poison Pokemon, Sludge Bomb and Giga Drain for some stab moves, and then Cotton Spore to lower our opponent's speed. Next, we'll send out our original ace, Overquill, with the ability Intimidate and Black Sludge as a held item. We'll give it Barb Barrage to poison Pokemon and then do extra damage on them when they're poisoned, Crunch for a Dark Stab move, Liquidation to handle ground types, and Smart Strike as another coverage move that always hits. Then we'll send out Hydreigon, the Dark and Dragon type pseudo-legendary Pokemon. With the ability Levitate, it will be immune to ground types, and we'll give it a Life Orb for extra damage. Its moveset will consist of Nasty Plot for setup, Dark Pulse and Dragon Pulse for stab moves, and Flash Cannon to handle fairies that threaten it with a 4x weakness. Finally, we'll take another cue from Gita's team in Scarlet and Violet and send out a Kingambit. This Dark and Steel type Pokemon has the ability Supreme Overlord, boosting its attack for every Pokemon that's already fainted in the battle. This boost is 10% per fainted Pokemon, so with 5 fainted Pokemon already, we can get a huge 50% boost. We'll then stack this with the Black Glasses item, which will give us an extra boost on all of our Dark type moves. For its moveset, we'll use Kowtow Cleave, its signature move that never misses, Sucker Punch for priority, Iron Head for Steel Stab, and Zen Headbutt to handle its fighting type weakness. This team was already pretty good, since I wasn't really worried about levels or anything when I made the original one. I feel like I was able to just kind of tack on Hydreigon and Kingambit for 2 ace-worthy Pokemon, making really cool use of Kingambit's ability. So there we have it, a rematch team for each of the dual-type gym leaders and a dual-type evil team leader. I had a lot of fun making these, as there wasn't really any restrictions on items, abilities, or movesets. If you were paying attention, you noticed I put a lot of pseudo-legendary Pokemon on these teams. I would have done one for each of the teams, but unfortunately, there's no fire or grass-type pseudo-legendary yet, with Hydrapple being the closest thing in my opinion. If you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like it. I've only been doing YouTube since the beginning of the month, and I'm super thankful for all the viewers I've already gotten. If you really want to help out the channel, check out one of my other videos, preferably right after watching this one. Watching them back to back will really help me out with the algorithm. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. Catch y'all in the next video.